Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever found yourself wondering what exactly makes classrooms in places like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore feel so, well, distinct, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to dive right in and decode the fascinating cultural framework behind Asian educational models. Because when it comes to learning manners and respect, the Asian model is literally in a league of its own. Today, we're going to explore how these systems don't just push for academic excellence, but actually cultivate this really profound sense of personal discipline. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with a huge paradigm shift. Think about it. In the modern Western view, a teacher is often seen functionally as an information provider, right? They're a highly skilled professional offering an educational service. But over in the Eastern paradigm, the teacher is viewed as a moral guide. In Asian cultures, walking into a classroom is not a consumer transaction. The teacher is an elder, a shaper of character, and honestly, almost a spiritual figure.
And that stark contrast leads us right to a truly fascinating question, one that's going to act as our guiding light for this explainer. Is it actually possible to harmonize this incredibly deep-rooted Eastern discipline with Western creativity and critical thinking? Can we somehow blend the absolute best of both worlds without losing the immense benefits of either?
So, here is our roadmap for unpacking all of this. First, we'll explore the philosophy of the classroom. Second, we're going to look at filial piety and respect. Third, we'll examine rituals and manners. Fourth, we'll unpack the collective identity. And finally, we'll discuss blending East and West. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Philosophy of the Classroom, the Moral Elder. Let's look at the philosophical bedrock that serves as the literal operating system for Asian education.
Everything really kicks off way back in 551 BC with the birth of Confucius. His ancient ideals of courtesy, benevolence, and a really strong work ethic, they didn't just stay trapped in ancient texts. They spread like wildfire and became the operating system for entire civilizations. Even today, these values deeply influence modern classrooms across Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and China. In this model, learning manners and respect isn't just some nice extracurricular activity. It's the whole point. It's the very purpose of education. The ultimate goal is to cultivate virtues so you can contribute to a balanced, harmonious society.
Which brings us to our second section, filial piety and respect, the family as the first classroom. Where does all this respect actually originate?
The absolute linchpin of this entire system is filial piety, or xiao in Chinese. Basically, this is the deep moral obligation to honor, obey, and respect your parents and elders. It forms the root of literally all morality in this framework. So why does this matter so much for education? Well, because Asian cultures embed this deep reverence long before a kid ever steps foot inside a school building. The immense respect that's owed to parents, it naturally and seamlessly transfers right over to the teacher. The teacher effectively occupies a parental role when it comes to the student's moral formation.
And it's super interesting to see how universal this concept is across different Eastern traditions. For instance, in Thailand, Buddhist teachings give us bunkun. It's this profound sense of gratitude and indebtedness, where parents, and by extension, teachers, are viewed almost like enlightened monks. Or in India, under Hindu tradition, you have the guru, where a teacher is seen as a vessel of divine wisdom. Dishonoring a teacher in these cultures isn't just bad manners, it's considered spiritually dangerous. The cultural weight placed on education by the family is just massive.
Moving right along to Section 3, Rituals and Manners, Embodied Respect. This is where the invisible philosophy turns into highly visible, everyday habits.
A perfect example of this is the physical act of bowing. In countries like Korea and Japan, bowing to a teacher is absolutely not just some cultural quirk. It's a daily act of recognizing the moral authority of education itself. And get this, the exact angle of the bow mathematically communicates the level of respect. You've got a quick nod for low formality, a 45-degree bow for medium, and a full 90-degree bow for high formality. Students are literally building muscle memory for courtesy. Standing up when an adult enters the room, handing over a paper with two hands instead of one, these tiny physical habits are incredibly powerful moral training tools.
And the language itself totally encodes this respect too. Take the Japanese word sensei. It literally translates to one who has gone before. It's an honorific used for doctors, masters, and elders, not just educators. In Korea, the honorific language is so strict that you literally cannot address a teacher with the same verb forms that you'd use for your friends. Every single sentence a student speaks verbally reinforces the social order and their respect for the learning process.
Now, this next practice almost always astonishes Western observers. This is Japan's suji, which is their daily cleaning ritual.
There are 0 janitors during school hours. None. The students themselves sweep, mop, wipe down the windows, and yes, even scrub the school toilets. Why? Because it drives home the point that the school belongs to everyone. It communicates that absolutely no task is beneath you, and that dignity comes from communal service, not just getting an A on a test. I mean, imagine how much more a student respects a classroom when they're the ones tasked with keeping it clean.
And that idea of communal service leads us perfectly into Section 4, the collective identity, we before I.
This right here is perhaps the single most important difference between Eastern and Western classrooms, collectivism versus individualism. The Eastern focus really prioritizes group harmony, unified standards, and quiet concentration. Meanwhile, the Western focus is all about individual expression, rapid creativity, and constant collaborative stimulation. In the East, listening quietly to the teacher is the silent role, because deferring to authority maintains social harmony. But in the West, speaking up and sharing individual ideas directly is the norm.
Because of this deep sense of collective identity, classroom discipline operates completely differently. In an Asian classroom, disruptive behavior, like showing up late or talking out of turn, isn't just a simple rule violation. It's actually viewed as a betrayal of the group's shared goals. Punctuality is respect for the group. The social fabric itself prevents misbehavior. Teachers honestly don't need to constantly use praise or punishment to manage the room, because peer accountability and a deep-seated culture of sustained attention do the heavy lifting for them.
Finally, we arrive at our last section, blending East and West, a global synthesis. How can these two very different worlds learn from each other?
Let's be totally objective here. Neither system is completely flawless. Impartially speaking, the extreme test pressure, the intense fear of losing face, and the suppression of critical questioning in some Asian systems carry real, heavy costs. But conversely, the Western flattening of authority and constant distraction can seriously hinder deep focus. But blending these approaches, combining Eastern discipline, focus, and respect with Western innovation, critical thinking, and creativity, that offers immense, literally transformative potential.
At the end of the day, despite the wildly different cultural approaches, there's really just one shared goal here. That singular goal is to create an educational environment where students can cultivate both high academic excellence and deep moral character, because that's what prepares them to thrive in an interconnected, globalized society.
So, what are the practical adaptations? What can Western educators actually do tomorrow? Well, first, we can work to restore teacher dignity, treat them as honored professionals, not just vendors of information. We can teach embodied respect through small physical habits like standing up or specific greetings. We can really emphasize effort over innate ability, which is a deeply Confucian growth mindset. We could introduce morning focus rituals to set the tone for the day. And we could even adopt collaborative practices like Japan's lesson study model, where teachers actually sit down and refine lessons together to continuously improve teaching quality.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this absolutely brilliant quote from the source material. In Asian cultures, the teacher is not a vendor of information, the teacher is a guardian of civilization. It just beautifully captures the ultimate takeaway here. Education isn't merely a transaction, it's the sacred transmission of wisdom, grace, and courtesy across generations. By understanding how the Asian educational model prioritizes manners, respect, and the collective good, we have to ask ourselves a pretty vital question. What aspects of this deep educational etiquette could we adapt to help the students in our own communities reach their absolute highest potential? Thank you so much for exploring this with me. Keep learning and keep asking great questions.